All right, welcome back to the Fuse Show, everybody. I'm joined today by my guest, Jon Stern. Jon is the co-founder of Ringpin, which helps companies reach customers in innovative and meaningful ways. He's a relationship builder with significant leadership experience, and he lives in San Diego with his wife and young kids. Welcome to the show, Jon.
Thanks a lot for having me. Excited to be here.
Okay, so I want to start off with something super important. I read somewhere that you have never had a cup of coffee. Is that true?
Yes, and you're taunting me with a cup right there. I like it.
It wasn't accidental. I was on my last call. I was like, "Oh gosh, I'm talking to Jon in 10 minutes. I got to go make a cup of coffee." It's like I don't even normally drink an afternoon cup, but you know, cheers
Yeah,
to you. So what's the story with that?
there's not really much of a story. Well, first of all, I'm a very strange or picky eater. So a lot of my diet would probably surprise people or, be odd to most people. But never really got into coffee or was interested in it. And I've never really been accused of needing more energy or anything like that. So I've always been a late night person and an early morning person. So never felt the need for a pick me up. And water is like my main drink.
Well, it's probably good for you. I feel like every other week there's a new article out on like coffee is good for you, coffee is bad for you. Like I'm not sure what the final verdict on that is.
I think, like most other things, it's probably, something in moderation. And, if you fit it into your life in a good way, or if you don't have high energy in the morning, maybe it's good before, a big interview or meeting or something like that. But if you're
Sure.
drinking like 16 cups a day and you can't function without it, then you're probably having, some sort of problem with it. But I
Yeah.
wouldn't know. I like hot cocoa with marshmallows and whipped cream when people are having coffee.
That sounds good, but it's 100 degrees outside right now, so I think we'll have to wait till it's a little bit colder for that. So help us understand what Ringpin does. Like, help us understand kind of the idea behind Ringpin and what you do to serve your clients.
Yeah, my good friend and I built a platform that helps people engage offline as well as online. So for companies or brands that have either a physical location or a physical product, they can use that as a touch point to like have a digital experience. So they can have phone calls or text messages. They could have people sign up, watch videos. Any digital campaign that they're usually running online, now they can run them offline, from a display or in a store or on a product. So it's cool because it allows them to do it when people are entering a store or when they're using a product. So it's a relevant experience based on where they are and what they're doing. And a lot of times people that are advertising offline, they have no way to find out, was that sign effective? Did that billboard have an
Yeah.
impact? Using our stuff, they can actually track that and determine a lot about their user and change the experience over time based on the data that they gather on the users.
I see. I mean, we know QR codes aren't new, but it seems like they're making a bit of a revival, probably thanks to COVID and the, you know, QR code menus and other things. But what is your take on like QR code usage adoption? And by the way, like maybe I'm late to the party, but I noticed a few months back that on my iPhone I can just scan a QR code with the camera, and that produces a Safari link, which is pretty handy. I remember when I used them like years ago, it was much more difficult to chase those links.
You know that there's two different things that kind of happened at the same time. One was the pandemic, obviously, which forced all the contactless stuff, and it started with menus here in the U.S. And the other is that all the phones or most phones now are able to scan QR codes natively without needing a QR code scanner or a special app or something like that. So really, those two things together were the reason that we decided to dive into this and really lean into the QR codes because, like you said, they've been around 25 years. And it used to be a dirty word about 8 months ago when I would call people and be like, hey, we're working on a QR platform. I'm like, click. Because people either had a bad experience 8 years ago when they tried to do it and they didn't get the engagement, or they're used to just going to a static page or even a dead page that doesn't, exist anymore. So our codes, what kind of is different about them is we call them programmable QR codes. So you can embed metadata into them that can change over time. So like if you know who's scanning it, you can personalize the page for them. It could be like, hey, Jim, here's another cup of coffee. Click here to buy now. Click here to have it delivered, or click here to tell us the coffee sucks. Or if it's, in a location, it can give you different, like let's say for flowers or something, it could give you different care instructions in the Northeast than the Southwest based on where you scanned it. So like time and location data and product and people
Amazing.
data can all be embedded into these codes to make sure that they're really driving like a relevant and personalized experience.
I see. I'm going to try to formulate a question that just came to my mind. So I'm not prepared to ask this, and it'll probably be butchered a little bit. But so from like a sales perspective, is there a burden of education that's on your shoulders for prospective clients on like, how do I use this? Or what are some ideas that you have that I can use it? Or is it more that most of them are coming to you and they already know how they want to use it? They just need you to help implement it.
It's actually, we wish it was a lot more of the second, but it's a lot of the first. And, like we said, most people are used to the standard QR codes that go to one page and they're typically not even mobile optimized or whatever. And you're just sending someone to your website. And because what we're trying to do is enable any digital action, we're just kind of a distribution channel, and we want them to bring whatever digital campaigns they're using. Like if they're trying to get someone to sign up for a webinar, we can have that be one of the options through the QR code. Or if they want someone to scan a poster and buy sunglasses, they can do that also. So most people aren't aware that you can change what the QR code does and also pick which elements or actions you want to drive. And we have a playbook of so many different actions that people can do. It can be a bit overwhelming. So it really helps to talk about what other people in their industry are doing, whether they want to gather user-generated content, reviews, upsells, things like that. There's just so many different options because we can provide, or we can allow them to use any digital campaign or action that they have. And, online, they're used to doing all this stuff through email or text messaging or whatever it might be. And to know now that you can do that in the physical world through a poster or a display or a product is a little bit of education. And they come to us and like, oh, we know we want a QR code on our can and we want it to go to our website. And we're like, well, why would you want it to go to your website? Like, what action do you want to drive? Let's just put that action on there instead of the website and make it really, concise and clear to the user. So like, oh, that's cool. Let's do it. And then if we want to do something where we also have an API where they can pass data to us, they're like, what type of data should we put in there? And it's like, oh, maybe you segment your customers based on who hasn't purchased in 90 days. Maybe they need a refill. So when they scan their QR code, say, hey, is it time for a refill or something like that? And helping them pick which data is relevant and what they should be displaying to their customers. So we're building up use cases, and those use cases, each one helps the next customer. And we say, oh, this is what we did for Toys R Us or something like that. And then it becomes a lot easier for them to pick what's relevant to them. But as we're coming to market, there's so many different use cases and so many different industries that we've talked to. We're just trying to kind of narrow down that playbook and make it more of a turnkey solution to let them choose from a menu of options of what they want to do.
I see. So I know you've landed several enterprise level clients. I mean, how are you going about doing that? So like Toys R Us or some of the other examples of enterprise clients you've landed, what's been the process to get them?
Yeah, and to be frank, I really wish that there was more of a process, but because we are still, just coming to market, most of it has been old school sales outreach and relationships and referrals. So like Toys R Us came through one of our advisors, and he has a good relationship with them and made the introduction. And, we just ended up fitting a need for what they were trying to do. And we're in phase 1 of 3 phases with them. Some others were just, a long sales process because these are enterprise deals that require an API integration. And some enterprise deals have closed in less than 10 days. So there isn't any repeatable process yet, unfortunately. As a sales leader, I'm eager to get that repeatable process because then we can scale the team and grow much faster. But we're still kind of at the trial and error mode to figure out what's attractive to people and basically the easiest way to get this in everybody's hands. So most of it is, old school. It's kind of funny. Everyone has come from a different place. I've been on other podcasts. We've gotten customers from that. I met a customer on Clubhouse, the audio app. We've gotten people from LinkedIn, from phone calls, so different channels for different people. And we're just trying to figure out which channel is going to be most effective and where the people that, we're targeting hang out. So still in trial and error phase and nailing down the process, but we have a no code front end. So almost everyone starts with us making a site for the person, being like, hey, this is what we're thinking about for you. Let's chat about, how we could customize this, because I can make a site for a prospect in less than 2 minutes. It doesn't take very long to, get something in their hands, and typically they scan the code and they're like, whoa, what is this thing? I'm like, oh, this is just, an idea I put together based on your website, but I would love to see what actions are important to you, and let's talk about how we can build that. So it's kind of backwards. We start usually by building it for them and then talk about how they can really use it. Yeah.
One of the things I'd love to chat about, you and I talked about this offline, but is the idea of friction in the sales process, and especially when you're selling to larger clients, enterprise level clients. What would you say to that? I mean, just getting to the decision maker. Because you can prepare something that's really, really cool, and if you end up pitching that to somebody that has no ability to make a decision, I don't know, it can kind of stall out.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different ways. Like, I always try and figure out and be very direct and say, hey, who's in charge of this type of thing, or who would be handling this, or who would get the most value out of this, and try and get those names in the beginning. And if not, just try and find your champion within the organization to kind of run with it. And it's usually the person whose job it'll help, or who will make the most money or get the biggest promotion if it's successful. And you kind of have to identify what everyone's motivations are within the industry or within the company. And sometimes, we'll run into a roadblock where someone will be like, oh, I don't want to add another thing, or, the developers don't want to, do anything or give up logos or whatever. So you really have to figure out each person's motivation within the organization. And like you said, just remove barriers, remove friction, whatever we can do. And ours is a long-term play that we're trying to build with these companies. So, if like price is an obstacle, we'd be like, okay, let's, do a proof of concept first, and let's start with something really small, just so you can see the value that it drives. And if that works, let's grow from there. So we just try and get our foot in the door and then expand from there. One of our biggest customers, they started with one really small project with their e-commerce department using it in store. So you had to go to store, you scan the code, and then you're actually shopping on their e-commerce department in the store, but you get to try the stuff on and everything there. And now they're in their third or fourth different department within the company is using our QR codes for all different use cases. And plus, once you put your QR code in a product or on a sign, you're going to want to continue with that, because you don't want your customers to have a bad experience of scanning codes that don't lead anywhere. So it's a really interesting process. I don't know if you can hear my kids next door. I have two young ones, and
I love it, man.
They're probably trying to get in here and hang out. And I hear my 5-year-old consoling my 3-year-old right now. So I think she's going to do a good job.
Did you ever see that video? It's like, it was pre-COVID, but the CNN video or whatever, where the commentator was like, he was,
and the mom comes in dragging the kids out. That one is a classic. I've basically lived that about 100 times this past year. But it is one of the other, you try and find the silver lining and stuff of COVID, is that people understand that your work life and your personal life mix together, and these types of things happen all the time. And I've actually only had one person that was like, "Can you get rid of those kids?" And I was like, "Not really."
Get rid of you. How about that?
Yeah, so he got rid of me, but I felt like it was
no loss.
I didn't feel too bad about it. So it's been interesting, working from home. I've worked remotely most of my career, but working remotely and working from home are different things. And and typically, like, kids would be off at school during the day, so they wouldn't be here. And now everyone's at home, so we got a crowded house. Everyone's fighting for our internet connection, and you never know what's going to happen every day.
Yeah, I love that. I think it makes it more human. It makes you more human. It makes the experience just more relatable and human.
Well, you and I talked, a couple times about work-life balance and stuff like that. And as we're both entrepreneurs, it's hard to have a work-life balance. We basically always have work to do, and we want to be there for our families also. So I intertwine the two. And my daughter has been on multiple, Zooms with me, even a webinar, when she was only 5 years old, and she ended up selling Ringpin, to the person on the webinar, and she did a phenomenal job. And I love bringing her involved in the business. We were driving home from my parents' house a couple weeks ago, and she said, "Daddy, now that I have a computer, I want to help with Ringpin." And I said, "Oh, that'll be great." And she goes, I said, "What are you going to do?" And she said, "Well, I want to do some research on how to start a business and how to get customers." And I said, well, that's awesome. And she goes, well, I'm just going to need someone to read the pages to me and then write down all my notes on it. And I was like, oh, that'll be cool. But I love getting them involved as much as possible. And they see me working all the time. So I think it's good for them to see, like, if you have conviction about something and you work hard on it, that you can make anything happen. So I love having them involved. And as long as the people aren't that one guy that didn't like seeing kids, most people are pretty understanding these days.
Yeah, totally. I think it's great. It's so healthy for your kids too, to get that experience. I mean, this is a whole nother tangent, but I think it's a lot more useful than a lot of things that are being taught in regular schools, much more actionable, certainly.
Absolutely. I mean, now I have heard more about, like, classes on entrepreneurship and stuff like that. So some more real world stuff, but how is anyone going to have a better education than actually doing the stuff and being involved from a young age? I worked for my dad. Probably shouldn't broadcast this. I don't know if his university would love it, but he was a professor. He has been for 49 years. And when I was like 6 or 8 years old, I used to grade, this was pre-Scantrons, I used to grade his exams. And I would make a little song like A, B, C, C, and like grade the exam singing my song. And he'd pay me like a quarter. And I would always be like, hey, is there an exam I can grade or something like that? So I was involved at a very young age. I ended up working for him. He had an IT consulting also. So I did that as well. And that really taught me, a lot about business. And, ended up starting my own IT consulting firm right out of college because that's what my experience was. And I could work for myself and have a flexible schedule and all that type of stuff. So I actually worked full time when I was in college, so missed a fair amount of classes because I was working, but it ended up, giving me a pretty good, background to build my career off of.
That's great. It reminds me of one of the things that we've been doing lately. So two of my girls are 14 and they're too young to get a job at most places. I think Chick-fil-A may hire 14-year-olds, but they've asked, and it's a very limited number. So they've not been able to land a job there. But so we've been DoorDashing. So my deal with them is I drive and they do all the work. So they run the app, they do the pickups, do the deliveries, and we take turns. And half of the money that's earned goes towards their extracurriculars and half of it goes directly to them. Nice. And I just Venmo them and they have their own bank account and all that. So it's like, in my big play is like, I get to spend time with them and like, it's so much better than just sitting in front of the TV or whatever. So it's been nice, but it's neat to see all the things that they're learning from that experience. It's pretty well-rounded.
I think it's awesome. And also they see the value of the dollar and, that they work, and the more that they work, they can make more and then they can get more freedom to buy the stuff that they want. I would have done that for sure. We didn't have DoorDash, obviously, when I was a kid. I babysat when I was 14, and it was good to teach, responsibility, although I would eat all the junk food in the house. So I don't know if I kept the kids safe, but they had no food when they came home. And then I worked in a women's shoe store for 4 years, all throughout high school. So from 14 to 18, I worked in the back of a women's shoe store, and but the owner of that store taught me a lot about business, and he actually got me involved in a lot of the things. Like when we had leftover shoes, I would kind of negotiate deals, how we'd get rid of our extra inventory and stuff like that. So all that stuff I think is great experience. And basically, I don't think it's ever too early to expose your kids to the real world and to business stuff. And I'm also part of this group called Thursday Night Sales, which is like the longest running weekly Zoom happy hour for sales professionals. And we talk about a lot of like hard topics on there, and a lot of people don't like it, but sometimes my kids listen in and like, oh, it's inappropriate for kids, but it sparked all sorts of conversations between my kids and I that we would have never had if they hadn't talked about that type of stuff. So, obviously they get some colorful language from it and things like that, but I think the lessons are important, and they talked about respect between men and women in the workplace and stuff like that. And those are conversations that I wouldn't have thought to have, unless they were exposed to, seeing me in a work environment and hearing other people tell their stories about what happens at work. So I'm pretty liberal with, exposing to my kids to a lot and then seeing what kind of works. But I think it's really good to get them involved and get them responsibility as early as possible.
I agree. It's interesting. My wife and I were just having a conversation about that the other night, and the idea balancing between exposing our kids to challenge, hardship, et cetera, versus making them comfortable. So like making them stronger versus making them safer. And Jordan Peterson talks a lot about this, but that's the general idea, right? Like he has a chapter in his book called "Don't Stop Your Kids When They're Skateboarding." The idea that like, the world is a dangerous place, and we've got to prepare them on how to survive in the world. So why not start when they're under our roof and we have that level of influence? And I had this like crazy feeling, like this sense of urgency. I was driving home from my office the other day, and both of my 14-year-olds are starting high school in the fall, like in a couple of months. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like I have this narrow window. The time is coming to an end that they're going to be under my roof. And I want to make the best of every moment that I have.
It's funny, a coach that I have been using for a while, who I like a lot, she has a program coming out that says 90% of the time that you spend with your kids is before they're 18 years old, in life. So, we have to maximize this time that we have with them and decide how to spend it and really take advantage of it. Because I know when I turned 18, I was out and I told my parents I'm going to school and I'm never living here again. And I moved across the country. So I didn't see them nearly as much. And, what's more important than your kids and your family? So try and take advantage of it. And for you, I can only imagine having two 14-year-old girls. That seems like basically the hardest age possible. So you probably have your hands full and you probably get frustrated at times, but you also just have to realize this is a valuable time and cherish it, and that you don't have that much time like that you're still going to like you and still want to hang out with you and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's trippy, man. I feel like I do reasonably well at work, like in my career. Like I generally feel like I'm competent to handle things at work. I go home and it's a whole nother story. Like I have all girls at home. So I have my wife, and then we have 3 girls at home. I have an adult daughter and then an adult son, but they're moved out. So it's like, I just feel out of my league. I'm practicing empathizing and like, don't just give solutions, but like all this stuff. And it's like, I'm not giving up, but I struggle, man. It's hard.
Well, same with me. I'm used to having leadership positions at work, and then I come home and my wife bosses me around all day, and I tell my 3-year-old to do something, and he's like, no, and I can't fire him or put him on a PIP or anything, and so we're struggling. Timeouts aren't really effective. He like eats timeouts like cookies. So I'm trying to figure out, what gets through to him. And it's really funny trying to balance, those different relationships, how, at work you can be in the saddle, exactly what you're doing. Then you're at home and no idea. But I think the reality is everyone's just figuring it out and no one knows the answers to everything. And totally. You do the best you can, and everyone's doing the best that they can. And particularly this past year has been really hard. And just surviving is like, an accomplishment. And you just,
True.
Try and get through everything the best to your know-how.
Yeah, I agree. The one saving grace is that we know that it's through hardships and failures of our parents, failures of other people in our lives that shape us, like, right, and that build that resilience. It's like, it's not an excuse to abuse that idea, of course, but there's something to be said about that. Like, my imperfections, though I fight against them, are actually helping to shape my kids in a hopefully in a positive way in the future, building resilience and all of that.
Probably in a negative way, like, I would never want to do what my dad, John, wants to do, also. But I think Obama had a pretty good quote. He said, we're all crazy, and your job as a parent is to pass along as little of your crazy as possible to your kids. Totally. And I think that, I want them to have some of the good crazy that we have, but I see things in my kids like, they're just like me like that, and I wish that they wouldn't be like that. And it's like, really, I wish I wasn't like that or whatever. So you see the best and worst of yourself and your kids. And I think that there's only so much that you can do. Really, they are who they are. They have their personality from a very young age, and like you said, you just try and keep them safe and give them space to be curious and explore themselves and figure out what's going to work for them and all that stuff.
Totally. Yeah. Keeping on the topic of relationships, I want to segue into sales, and I'm curious that you have a lot of sales experience and I do not. I'm curious to get your perspective. And so in our business, like, we're selling to larger clients. So, I mean, our deal size is much larger. And my background previous to that is in SaaS, where it was a very small deal size. And David's my co-founder, and we started out just, having no sales experience. We read up on it a little bit, but like, the emphasis that we've had is just on relationships and building that personal connection, because kind of it's taking that from, my previous life in law enforcement. I was a crimes against children detective. It's like, I had to learn how to build relationships with people and make connections with people. But it's interesting because I hear a lot of people say like, oh, it's B2B. It's like, it's a different process, et cetera. But like, in my observation, it's still been a human making a buying decision. It's just a larger buying decision. It's like, what would you say about like the relationship aspect, the human connection piece as it relates to that sales decision?
I'm probably a bad person to ask about that because I over optimize on the relationship, and end up, I try and build strong relationships. At every B2B thing that you're talking about, who runs the B2B? There's people there. So you're talking to people. Every person has their own motivation, has their own reason for wanting to do something or not do something. So if you don't get to know those people and know what motivates them or what drives them, then how can you ever say that your solution is the right solution for them? So mine probably takes a little bit longer than a lot of sales cycles because I really am maximizing that relationship. And a lot of my best sales have come by saying, hey, you know what? This isn't the right solution for you right now. You should try these, competitors of ours because that's a better fit for what you're doing right now. And you build that trust and relationship. And those relationships supersede what business or what service you're offering. And if you become a trusted advisor to these people, eventually you're probably going to have something that they need, and that's when you go in for the sale. So like I've worked with many of the same customers throughout industries, even when I've switched, totally different industries, I can go back to those people because I always do what I say I'm going to do. And you build that trust and the rapport with the people so that you become trusted. And then it's much easier because people buy from people they like and that can solve their problems. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know these people, how can you solve their problems? You're just pushing your agenda, not what their agenda is.
Yeah.
No one wants to hear what you're up to. They want to, like, when you approach someone, like, how does it impact them? How's it going to make their day better? How are they going to make more money? How are they going to reach their goal? No one cares that your product does all this stuff or whatever. It's like all about them. And if you don't know them, how can you do that stuff? So I always go for the relationship and try and get to know what makes these people tick more than just like surface buying decisions on, a software platform or something like that.
Yeah. Have you had that experience where you buy a product not because of the salesperson, but in spite of them?
Like you didn't want to talk to them anymore, or
no? I mean, there was a product that Dave and I bought, like a course, a sales course.
And, I hated this guy, but I want what they have. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, and this was a 19-year-old kid, and like he was awful. And I felt tender for him. And at the end of we bought the product. It was interesting because we were sold on the product ahead of the sales call because of all the material they had. But the call was awful. And the kid was just awful, so pushy. And I felt bad for him because he was trying to do his best, but it was bad. So like we bought in spite of him. And afterwards I asked him, I said, would you mind if I just share a little bit of feedback from the call? And he's like, no, that's cool. And I told him in like an honest way, like truly trying to just give him some insight, because I didn't want him to walk away from that thinking that he sold us, because he didn't. Like it was distasteful. It wasn't good. But what I'm getting at is like, I think there are situations where people buy the product because of the product in spite of the sales process or in spite of the salesperson. And then I also think it's true that people will buy, the experience of a client not shopping around because of the quality of the relationship that was built. So yeah, they may save a little money elsewhere, but there's that weight of the relationship that causes them to buy versus shopping around.
I've had times where I've had an inferior product in the market and people would work with me just because they knew I would take care of them and because of that relationship. But let's say you're looking for something like, a Jeep Cherokee 2015 that you want in black. Like that's a product and a car that that you want, and it doesn't really matter who's selling it to you. You know what the value is online with all these tools, and you're going to get what you want because there's product market fit, or that it solves the need that you have. But there's some things where it's like a little more options or gray area. That's where they're going to go to the person that they like or that they trust. And I have had situations like I had one. This guy wanted to sell us on this AI software, and I was like, cool, great, like let's get a demo. And he's like. He starts the call with, listen, I'm not going to show you a deck. We'll just talk about your needs and get right into the demo. Within 1 minute, he's showing me the deck and he's reading me straight from the deck. I was like, listen, you told me you weren't going to show me a deck. Like, he's like, oh yeah, we're going to get to the demo. We just have to go through the deck first. I was like, well, you told me at the beginning of the call that we weren't going to do it. And I can actually read, so you don't have to read the thing to me the whole time. And he really turned me off to the whole experience with that company. And we didn't end up going with anyone. Like we didn't have an immediate need for it, but that experience really turned me off, because I'm a big believer in do what you say you're going to do. And if he would have told me, hey, we're going to go through you have to go through the deck for 3 minutes before you can get a demo, like, fine, let's go through as fast as possible, but don't tell me you're not going to do it and then do it.
Yeah.
I got really angry. I don't usually get angry during calls like that. I was like, come on, man, like do it. Let's get into it. And a lot of people really do overcomplicate the sales cycle, and like, don't give the customer what they want, and like, oh no, we have this process, we have to do it this way, you can't. And a lot of times that happens now with a fragmented team, like SDR to AE handoff or something like that. Like the SDR isn't allowed to talk about the product or something. All they can do is book a meeting. Like, no, like, tell me about it, or like, no, we can't do that. You got to talk to the AE. Like, well, I'm already on the phone right now and I'm interested. Let's get into it. And it gets overcomplicated. So I think, like, obviously you need to run your process, and if you have to do a discovery first and all that stuff, it's fine. But like, be upfront about what the process is, and people are more comfortable if you're in a process that about, and there's no surprises like, oh, all of a sudden, no, you have to do this before you can get the demo or before you can do the trial. Like, well, that's a surprise. Yeah. You didn't tell me that at the beginning, and I don't like bait and switches and things like that. So I try and be overly transparent from the beginning about what people are getting into.
Yeah, that's great. You strike me as a very abundant kind of person. And I'm curious, like, I guess to play devil's advocate with this idea, some people may say, like, well, if it's all relationship based, then how do you manage that many relationships? Like, how do you keep up with that many relationships? And what about the ones that don't pan out? And in my mind, like, I think you probably know my opinion from conversations, but I'm curious to hear, like, what you would say to counteract that. Because obviously what you're doing works. So what would you say to the naysayer?
It takes time, and, you have to build up those relationships and those trusts. And when you switch industries, you have to, meet all the new people in that industry and establish yourself as an authority and stuff like that. But like when a good example is when COVID came around, there's a lot of people needing help and a lot of people like out of work looking for jobs and stuff like that. And I basically took meetings with every single person that asked. There was no one that I said no to. And I ended up, still burnt out now, probably from, doing 8 to 12 Zooms per day and all that stuff. And I'd help some people, and some people would never thank me or respond to me again. And some people, to this day would basically do anything for me because of it. And I really don't look for anything in return. You just, meet people and do the right thing. And I think eventually things work out the right way. And like right now, I have the best network I've ever had in my career. And a lot of it is because I did take the time to meet all these people. And then one person will say, oh, I met Jon, he's doing this thing, you should talk to them. And that's where we've gotten probably half of our business just from referrals from people that I've met in the past year. So I think that everybody's worth a 15-minute conversation, and some people aren't going to be able to add value to your situation if, they might be real early in their career or might not be someone that you bond with or whatever, but you can usually tell that really early. And, we're all busy, but almost everyone can make time for 15 minutes. And I always say people make time for what they want to do in life, and if you want to do it, you can find time to make that happen. And obviously as you get busier, you can do less and less of those, but I think it's really important. And to me, it's really valuable to be known as someone that can be there for people and that's like consistently there and reachable. And if you have a problem, you can come to me. And then if I have a problem, I have a group of people I can go to now also. Yeah. And I used to never go to people for help. I would always think, oh, I can handle it. I can do everything by myself and all that. And it was very strange for me to ask for help. I have a good friend who's, I call him my friend-tor because he's my friend and he says mentor benefits, Scott Leese. And he's the first one that I asked for help. And he's a well-known sales leader online and taken like 5 companies from 0 to 50 million and stuff. And I never asked for help, but now I text him all the time for stuff. And he's always been there for me, that super consistent person that you're going to get a response from every time right away. And you can't put a dollar sign on the value of that and the reputation that you can build up and the network that you can build for being there for people like that. Absolutely. So I think, some people are going to shortcut that and skip the relationship part and just be like, no, and in transactional sales, you can do that a little bit more if you're just selling some commodity that there's no real value add of a relationship or whatever. But I don't think you're ever going to go wrong having a conversation with someone or, gathering information or whatever. And that's why I try and be available as much as possible. Absolutely.
Unfortunately, that's a very rare quality. So where does that come from? Like, why do you believe that? And how do you, I'm not asking questions very well. Where does this essence come from of who you are and the way you handle this?
I think it goes, a lot goes back to my family. Like my grandma was a social worker. She always wanted me to be a social worker. I was like, well, Grandma, I don't think there's a lot of money in it. And I want to, travel all the time and have a big family and do all this stuff. Like, I think I'll do that on the side. So I've actually been volunteering since I was like 13 or 14 years old. First, it was at a foster home, in Michigan. And then throughout college, the only class that I went to consistently was the one that I led called Project Outreach, where we went and took a group of college kids to a maximum security, kind of prison home for boys or whatever, and did programs in there and really saw like, how people are very similar. And it's just, some different situations lead different people down different paths. And then as soon as I got here to San Diego, I started volunteering with San Diego foster youth and, still involved with that. And it's just, I think that giving back is very important to me. I know that I've been afforded a lot of luxuries in life and privileges in life. And I feel an obligation to help other people. And I think that I've always been a problem solver. So people have always come to me with their problems from very early age. And I'm able to take a small amount of information and turn it into like actionable stuff. I think that's one of my major skills, being able to make decisions on limited information so I can listen to someone's story and give some advice. Or, frankly, I'm 44 years old. I've been through a lot of ups and downs in my careers. I've seen a lot. I usually have a story of what not to do from something that I've done in my career. And if I can share somewhere that I've tripped up and help someone avoid that, like that's a really good way to give back that can save them, years on their career, or hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever it might have been that I did wrong. And I'm an open book. So like, I try and take the ego out of it. And if you can share your losses and celebrate them and grow from them, then I think you can be really valuable to a lot of people, because there's always somebody that's trying to do what you've done before. And even like the kids that I mentor in the San Diego Foster Youth Program, I always encourage them to go back and volunteer. And they're like, well, why would I volunteer? What do I do? I was like, what are you talking about? You've been through this. You lived this program. You have so much to share with them. And I think everybody could give back. And, the world would be a better place if, more people were into like helping others instead of just helping themselves. But maybe that's an altruistic view or whatever.
That's true. We're just having a conversation on Sunday with my family about mentoring. And one of the things I told my daughter is that, if you're in a place where you're a little bit further down the path, like age is not relevant, right? Like if you're further down the path than someone else is, you can reach back and help that person. I think that the idea is that, I think probably for our whole lives, we should always have somebody that is mentoring us that's further down the path, and we should always be mentoring somebody or some other, a group of people as well.
Absolutely. And it's really hard to find good mentors. I mean, I'm really lucky that I found Scott, I feel like. And, I've tried, I hadn't had up until this past year, many people say, hey, Jon, will you be my mentor? It's usually like, it happens naturally or whatever, but a bunch of people came out and did that. And, you know that from how much pride and joy you can get out of seeing someone that you've helped really succeed and achieve more than they thought that they could. And most people, I have another one, David Fox, who's been a great mentor of mine. Most people think that they go into a mentoring thing like, oh, I'm going to teach this person so much, they're going to learn so much from me. And it turns out like typically the mentor gets just as much out of the relationship as the mentee. And almost everything that I end up telling the people that I'm mentoring, I'm like, oh, actually that advice was for me, not for you, and you don't really realize it until you're telling them that. And it's always a mutually beneficial relationship, or else it's not going to work out, just like anything else. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Jon, I'm super bummed that we're out of time. I have a hard stop, as you know, and this has been fun. I would love to do a round 2.0 if you're game for that in the future.
I'm game, and you know what? Well, no, I can't commit to it, but I would consider sipping a cup of coffee just to see what it's like. But I don't want to leave the no coffee club. Like, so I always want to be able to say I've never had a cup, but maybe I would at least taste it once. And because I realize I'm so picky, and part of it is because my mom's picky, and I'm like, why am I so picky this late in life? So I'm trying to make some changes. And if there's something great about coffee that I have to try, I'd be honored to have a sip with you.
That's a big commitment. We have to handle that delicately, though. You can't just go get a Folgers cup of coffee. Like, we need to be very intentional about this. If it's going to be your first cup, it's got to be a good one.
My wife makes Brazilian coffee every morning. I don't know if that's like, qualifies or what's good coffee or bad coffee.
Totally,
but
yeah. It sounds like she's in the know then.
She's also Brazilian, so it's what she grew up with.
Even more so. Okay. All right. So she's going to make you the perfect cup of coffee for next time, and we'll do it live on air.
All right. I'm sweating bullets now just thinking about it, but I'm willing to give it a shot. I really appreciate you having me. This was super fun.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. And where's the best place for people to get in touch if they just want to say hi or learn more about Ringpin?
Jon at ringpin.com, Jon at ringpin.com.